I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
Another thing that I think that the internet has contributed to and how people travel is, turning travel into consumption, whether it's because you're there to eat certain meals or buy certain things, or even just to capture certain experiences. I think we've probably all been in that situation where, you get to an incredible site or some ancient historic monument and you're surrounded, and there are people there who are basically just there for the selfie. I wanted to try and think about, is there a way to travel that is less extractive and more just leaving yourself open to the experience?
That is today's wonderful guest, Lisa A. Bend. She's an American living abroad in Denmark, and she's a journalist. She's written for the New York Times, Time Magazine, Vanity Fair, Afar, among many other publications. And she has a new project. It's a newsletter on Substack called The Unplugged Traveler. And what she's doing is, quote, putting the serendipity back in travel one offline trip at a time, end quote. The idea is that she is traveling through Europe with no Google research, no reservations, and she's just showing up somewhere and not using her phone at all and writing about her experience. And I'm including this in this month's batch of episodes, which are designed to help you kind of get ahead of the trends in the coming year, because I do believe getting unplugged, getting more connected wherever we are, whether you're traveling or just at home, is something that is trending in a very good way. I think, we all want to kind of get back to reality, so to speak. We realize the digital reality is not reality. We find ourselves buried in our screens all too often. So this project has a lot to unpack, and that's what we do in today's interview. By the way, you can check out her Substack over at unpluggedtraveler.substack.com. We'll link up to it. And there are a lot of sort of mindset and philosophical things that come along with simply going into the world without your phone. So we talk about some of those things, including managing expectations and FOMO, some practicalities like how to approach locals for help, how to get away from the Instagram famous and get closer to the locally famous spots, some of the reasons why the Danish are so happy as we kick off the conversation, a little bit about her life abroad, what we can learn from that, lessons from living abroad in Spain and Denmark, and her unlikely journey from researcher to field reporter, and so much more. An incredible episode coming your way. Buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. Still have this cold. You might hear, I didn't have the cold in the interview, so you're not going to have to hear this voice throughout the episode, which is a fun one. Lisa shares her experience as an unplugged traveler, going out into the world, showing up at a destination, not using her phone. And we talk about some of the practicalities around that as well. As I mentioned at the top, there's some nuance to this now. What do you do when you need an app for something? and you don't have the phone? How do you kind of manage that? And so there are some practical things, but also huge implications from how you approach travel, how you are open to experiences, how you navigate a trip from a mindset perspective, not just from a logistical perspective. So a ton to unpack here around unplugged travel, and I'm excited to dive in. Quick, funny story. I met somebody at an event a couple days later, this interesting guy, David, who we've since met up, but I think this was a great sign for this interview because I was telling him about my podcast and we were just talking about different things. It was at a startup event in Oslo. And he said, "Oh, you need to talk to my friend Lisa Abend. She's doing this really cool newsletter about unplugged travel and telling me, you know, all the experience she has and all this stuff." And I was, oh my goodness, I just talked to her the other day. This is so random. So I felt like, all right, there's some serendipity there. That's a good sign. This episode coming your way is a lovely one. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Stick around on the back end. I'll leave you with a nice quote and a bit of a challenge at the end of this one if you pay attention to that. And I'll kind of wrap up the episode with a further, more specific challenge for you coming out of this one. If some of this conversation kind of hits home for you and you're like, I want to try this out. Got some easy ways for you to do that. So hope you stick around for that. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, last thing, we have a newsletter over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. Sign up. It's free. I'm actually working on a project to help people develop a healthier relationship with their smartphones. And that's something I've been sharing in the newsletter. So it's stuff like that that's going on in the newsletter that you don't get on the podcast. If you haven't signed up, join the community over there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. Lisa Abend, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's not often I can say this morning because I'm talking to people from all over, but we're both in Scandinavia because you're in Copenhagen, right?
And you're in Oslo, right?
Yeah. So we should have done this in person. Why couldn't we have met like partway across? You know, and then how do you meet up without phones nowadays? You're like, you know, it's old school. You're like, meet me at 12 o'clock at the train station under the clock.
That's exactly what I've been working on.
Of course, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, unplugged travel. I want to get all your sort of best tips for people that want to experiment with that, and yeah, a bunch of stuff around that. But I have to ask you about life in Scandinavia because you grew up in the States, or?
I did. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Lived in different parts of the States for school and then for work after. And then about 20 years ago, moved to Europe. And I didn't actually know that I was going to be there for 20 years. At first, I was in Spain for about a decade, and then I've been in Copenhagen for about another decade.
So was it a job opportunity that took you over there?
Not exactly. It's kind of a strange story. We
like strange stories here.
Okay.
Lisa.
Okay. This one is a little stranger than most, I think. I was actually an academic. I was a professor of history, a new professor, and I was teaching at a school that gave its young professors an early sabbatical so that you could go and basically take all of the research you had done during graduate school and turn it into your first book. And my research was on Spain. So I was in Spain doing that work and getting actually quite depressed by the prospect of spending the rest of my life doing this. And I had at that point published a couple of travel essays, just first-person essays. This was back when the New York Times used to publish those on the back page of its travel section. And so I had a couple of those to my name, but that was pretty much it. And I thought, I want to see if I can try making it as a real journalist. I want to see if I can do some real journalism. And there were elections coming up in Spain. So I pitched a story to an American newspaper about them. And it was a really boring story because the party that was in power everybody knew all the polls, and everybody was convinced that they were going to stay in power. And it's good that it was a very basic story because I had no journalism experience whatsoever. But I reported the story, wrote it, sent it in, and about 12 hours later, there was an early morning phone call from the bureau chief in Paris saying, I think we're going to need another story because the Madrid train bombings had just happened. And it was a huge, huge international story. It was the first major attack since 9/11. It was the first one in Europe. And all of a sudden, I was just thrust into it. And because it was so closely timed to the election, it actually changed the outcome of them. So within a period of 3 days, I went from doing research in an archive to suddenly being out in the middle of mass protests and this massive investigation and a real turning point in Spanish history and in Spanish democracy. And it was incredibly intimidating and overwhelming, but it was so exhilarating to do that kind of work and to feel like I was having an impact somehow and trying to tell this story. And for the next few months after that, this was way more fun than a bunch of historical research, I got to be honest. So I just started freelancing, and there was so much interest in Spain at that point. And I was just writing stories for anyone who would take them. And I actually did go back to the US and taught for one more semester, and then thought, no, I want to go back to Spain and keep freelancing. And so that is how I ended up in Europe.
So not only was that event a turning point in the elections in Spanish history, but a turning point in your career as well.
It was.
I guess.
Yeah,
because you just went from, I don't know what I'm doing, I guess I'm going to try this journalism thing and I'm going to write this article, to now I'm in the mix and it's crazy. And yeah, I mean, what a way to start your journalism career.
It is. And to be clear, the attacks were, it was a horrific tragedy, and nearly 200 people were killed in them. And so it's a strange thing to have that be the moment where your career becomes the thing that you dreamed it would be, to have that as a turning point. But that is the true story.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the job, right? I mean, a lot of journalists are out there covering these, difficult, complicated human tragedies because the rest of the world needs a more in-depth look at what's actually going on. And that's why you need people on the ground there. And going back to what brought you to Spain in the first place, why did you choose Spanish history? I mean, there's a lot to choose from.
There
right?
is. I mean,
what was the connection there?
Sometimes there's just those little logistical things that you don't realize are shaping your entire life and future, but they are. And in my case, it was when I was in college. That was the language that I happened to study, and it was where my college had a study abroad program. So I had done that while I was still at college and fallen in love with it. And so that was what drew me back to it once I was in graduate school.
Gotcha. Okay. And Copenhagen, how long have you been there?
It's been about 10 years here too.
Really? Do you speak Danish now?
This is such an embarrassing question to me. Have you heard Danish? No, sorry.
Yes, I have. Because I speak Norwegian, so okay. I know when I hear Danish, I can pick up bits and pieces, but it's very sort of frog in your throat type of. I don't know. It's kind of hard to. Yeah.
It's pronounced nothing like it's written, which is a big part of the problem. I have this idea that if I had actually moved to Norway or Sweden, I would be doing much better with the Scandinavian languages. I have not done so well with Danish. So I can understand a decent amount of it, but I'm not always so successful at making other people understand me.
Well, I don't know how it is there, but it's hard here in Norway where I live it can be difficult to get into the job market if you don't speak the language. And you having been there 10 years now, was that difficult at all? I mean, I know you're doing freelance journalism, but are you still working for this nonprofit?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're absolutely right. It is the same situation. When I moved here, though, I was just a freelance journalist, and I was writing primarily for American, a little bit for British outlets. So the language wasn't really an issue. And of course, as with Norway, or at least with Oslo, everyone in Copenhagen speaks absolutely beautiful English. So even for the reporting and that kind of thing, it wasn't an issue. But a little over a year ago, I did take a real job, and it is with a nonprofit. It happens to be a nonprofit that is very internationally focused, and there are a lot of native English speakers there. So that too, I've managed to get by.
Yeah, we're getting to unplug travel stuff. I promise everybody
No,
listening.
no, no. This is great.
It helps me to understand a bit more about where you're coming from and a little bit about your background. And also I'm curious because I'm an American living in Norway, and although Norway and Denmark are two different countries, Scandinavia, there could be some similarities within the Scandinavian culture. And I'm just wondering how you have found living in that culture. How has it impacted you or affected you or changed you or yeah.
It's funny because and this is almost certainly tied to the language issue. It's hard for me to ever imagine feeling like an insider here. And that is different than my experience in Spain. I do speak Spanish, so again, I think that has a lot to do with it. But I think that Danes they're very, and rightfully, I think, for many reasons, proud of being Danish. I mean, these are people who greet you at the airport with their flag and put it in their birthday cakes. So there is a very strong sense of national identity here, and a very keen awareness, I think, of the line between being an insider and being an outsider. And so I don't think I would ever feel like one of them. I know that a lot of people think that Danes are hard to become friends with, at least in a sort of deeper way. And that has not been my experience. But I do notice that the Danes that I'm closest to, my really close friends here, are ones who have spent a significant amount of time in the US or the UK, probably having lived there for a bit. So there's something there, I think, that can make it harder to sort of penetrate to a layer of feeling really at home.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop. Now, back to the show. It's interesting for me to hear that you felt like an insider in Spain because I I've talked about this with some other guests and just my own experiences that even with speaking the language at a fairly decent level, not great, believe me, but yeah, I was talking about this the other day with somebody, like it's hard to ever truly feel you still didn't grow up there. You still can't get all the references, the say the pop culture references or the small turn of phrase in a
That
conversation.
is true. But, there's something, maybe that's it. I actually really like that position. There was at some point when I was living in Spain that I realized I felt like I straddled this fence, that I knew the country and the culture about as well as an outsider could, as someone who was not born into it. But the fact that I still had that distance allowed me to notice things, or oftentimes to be delighted when I did learn some new reference and figured out what it meant or where it came from. And so there was actually, I think you're right. I should probably adjust what I said before. It wasn't like pure insiderism. I wasn't truly Spanish. I just I felt close enough to it to not feel any alienation from it, but still enough distance to have a lot to learn, which is a pleasurable thing for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's more maybe more relaxed in some ways. It's hard to pinpoint. I know. I mean, I think about this stuff a lot, being somebody who lives abroad. You know how it is, Lisa. It's like,
Yes.
it's just always, it's like part of everyday life. So you can't, it's not that you sit around thinking about, your cultural identity all the time, but sometimes it just comes to the surface in strange ways just through your daily interactions,
Absolutely. Like
Just
that time when you realize you're at the grocery store and you realize everyone's staring at you because you haven't put down the divider between your groceries and the other person's groceries on the belt. And it's such a small thing.
how
but
dare you, Lisa? How dare you?
Believe me, it was traumatic when I realized. But yeah, there are all of these little reminders that pop up when you're not necessarily prepared to be reminded that you're getting something wrong.
Or they come over your house and they see you putting peanut butter on your banana, and they're
and are
like, "What
horrified.
are you doing?"
That's disgusting. Yes.
Yeah, and maybe there's an element of maybe in Spain. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but maybe you could say in simplistic terms that it's just maybe it felt a little more like home in some ways. It was a little more of a comfort.
I think that's right. I think also, Spain is a more heterogeneous society than Danish is, so that they're a little more, of course, there are exceptions to this and it depends on where you are, but they're a little more accustomed to having people who aren't native Spaniards living among them. And that is, I think, a much more recent phenomenon in Denmark. And also, I noticed this with the language too, that part of the reason why I think I have problems speaking Danish is just a lack of confidence, because when I do try, I would say probably 95% of the time I'm met either with a what? They just don't understand. There isn't, they're not accustomed to hearing Danish spoken with a foreign accent. And so it doesn't get through to them, or they just switch automatically to English, which is incredibly polite and nice of them, but not necessarily the best thing for my language skills.
So if you feel, because I get the sense that you're like, okay, yeah, this is a cool place. I'm here now. I'm not sure if we're just meeting for the first time. I don't know if you have, certain ties there that are keeping you there, or, based on everything I'm hearing, is it kind of in the back of your mind where like, it doesn't sound like a place you're going to be forever. And does that mean you're thinking about what's next, or yeah?
It's a really good question. I really do, despite feeling like I'll never quite fit in here. I really love living here, and and I imagine that there's a lot of similarities for you with Oslo. There's so much about whatever you want to call it, the Scandinavian model that makes life really pleasant in these places. And whether that is, something really big like a welfare state that works, or a small thing like riding your bike to work every day, which sort of injects this little dose of pleasure into just this routine. I do really, really love living here. So I don't have any other place in mind right now that I want to go to, but yeah, I guess it's just an open question for me.
Okay. Well, okay, here's a question, because Denmark famously always at the top of the list of the happiest countries in the world on those
Right.
indexes when they come out. So anybody listening outside of Scandinavia, what do you think, being somebody who's lived there for a decade, what do the Danish do in terms of, why are they happy, I guess? Like what do others have to learn? What is something that we could steal from their culture and use in our own lives?
I'll tell you two things.
That's appropriate cultural appropriation.
Right.
I call that.
Right.
Yeah.
There we go. Two things that I've noticed that do just like really contribute to your outlook, I think. And one is that social trust. There are all of these examples that if you come as an American, you are astonished by, like the fact that they leave their babies outside in strollers while they go in, or in prams while they go in and have coffee, or even go to a movie, and everyone knows that the babies are safe. That level of trust in one another is, to me, it's almost impossible to overemphasize how that contributes to a sense of well-being. And the other thing, and I think it's related, is that to a greater extent than I've seen anywhere else, I feel like the government actually has its citizens' well-being in mind, and that it expresses that support for well-being in small ways, but that I kind of sometimes can't believe that there's government support for it. Like I remember a few years ago, there was this massive field on the edge of the city, and this is hectares and hectares of land that had been, I think that there had been some kind of factory there, and it had been used for industrial purposes, and then that had been torn down. And they wanted to convert this land to a forest. But to be able to do that, they needed to rebuild the soil. And the best way to do that, they decided, was to seed it with wildflowers. And so for a couple of summers, this massive expanse of land was just blooming with these incredibly gorgeous wildflowers, and the city encouraged anybody to come and pick them. And just like that little thing, like what city in the world does that? That's such an amazing thing. And it was this incredible scene of hundreds of people every weekend showing up with like their little baskets and filling their bike baskets with these beautiful flowers, just because the city thought it would be nice.
Sounds very Danish.
It was very Danish.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, the two things, social trust and the government, are actually, if you're looking at social trust, let's say from a societal perspective, like you're talking about, those are two things that really, like, an individual has no influence on, right? You could say, well, we have influence on the government, but by voting, but we know, some of these countries, there's corruption and all that kind of stuff. So in some ways, some people that are, the things you highlighted, if they're lacking in those, they almost need to relocate to a place that has that environment if they want to have that sort of pleasant feeling that you're describing in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be other ways to happiness too. I know, but it definitely helps to have those kind of big picture things.
Yeah, all of that informs like the daily lifestyle, which is what it comes down to, right? But
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I could give you another example, which is like because I do think that biking plays a huge role in this. That since that is the major form of transportation, and it's also the most efficient form of transportation, that you're not, you're spared for the most part that for me, very unhappy experience of having to spend hours each day in traffic. But on top of that, um, do you know what a desire line is? It's a
no.
phrase that urban designers use for where people want to walk,
Oh,
or in Denmark's case, where they want to bike. And so one there's one intersection where traffic was going in one way, and the city architects or city designers could see that people coming down this one street and trying to get onto another one were actually going up on the sidewalk with their bikes because they needed to get down to another street. And so after observing this enough, they just built a new bike lanes that allowed people to basically go against traffic because that's where their desires were taking them. And so again, like that way in which people, like the city, is actually responding to its citizens' needs and wants is, to me, pretty inspiring, and also I think a reflection of that commitment to well-being.
yeah, interesting. The birth of the Unplugged Traveler.
Yes.
Your Substack, unpluggedtraveler.substack.com. We'll link up to it. You had a line in one of the intro, perhaps it was the intro post you did, and you said, quote, like so many things in life, this project was born of failure. Just quickly before we get into it, I just kind of want, my thought is that we tend to undervalue failure as a method of giving birth to new ideas, I think. So anybody listening that is like going through something and it's not working or whatever, just understand out of the ashes can rise the phoenix. And,
So true.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like this is very much a passion project. You're not really sure how it's going to go, but you can give us, your quick sort of elevator pitch on what you're doing, and then we'll dig into the nitty gritty.
Okay, well, let me tell you first about the failure then, because I think that there's ways in which this, as a project, it responded to both like my personal situation and also just to some bigger ideas and concerns that I had been having for a while. So from the personal, it in some ways, yeah, was failure. It was that, as I said, I have been a journalist for a long time. A lot of the work that I do is travel writing. And like so many journalists out there, I've noticed over the years the way the opportunities to support for writing that pays anything close to a living wage have diminished, and really quite dramatically. So that situation, that sort of, I felt like I avoided it or delayed that decision as long as possible. And then last year kind of realized that, yeah, I needed a real job, that freelancing alone was not enough anymore to support myself. But I love travel writing, and I really, really missed it. And so part of this, just very selfishly, was to come up with a project that would allow me to do that work. And with this particular idea, it was an idea that I had pitched to a bunch of the magazines and newspapers that I write for, ideally as a column, where they would send me out around to different places around Europe, and I would try and navigate without a phone, basically. And nobody took it. And so that was the failure. And at which point I just thought, okay, I really want to be doing this. Let me see if I can do it myself. That's the personal side of it. From the more sort of, I don't know, philosophical side, it was was, of course, something, if you've been traveling for a while, that you've noticed the way that it has changed. And as a journalist, I've reported on over tourism, and of course, like that is absolutely in your face in many places throughout Europe. But even more than like just the numbers of people that I was seeing, it was the fact that so many of us, when we travel, seem to be seeking the exact same experience as everybody else. There was this real, what I kind of think of as a flattening of the experience, that we end up all, armed with our lists of best restaurants, or, Instagram shots of the places where we have to take selfies, that we all end up just encountering each other in the same places, drinking the same pour over coffees, and looking at the same sunsets. And so I was trying to think about what happens when we try and travel without the internet, and that was the birth of this newsletter.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you're on the right track, and you really love something if you feel like, oh, I can't make a full living at this, and I'm going to supplement this with a regular job, but yet you still do it,
Yes.
for the love of it. And then the idea being that you go to a different European city once a month is the idea, right? And then you just go without,
Exactly.
like, somebody has to recommend it. You don't do any research. You don't.
Right. The only thing that I allow myself to book the ticket there online. And so,
Well, you're not like a technophobe. You're not saying,
no.
all
And
technology is bad. You're trying to
no, not at
recap.
all.
You're trying to enrich your travel experience, or perhaps,
Exactly.
make it a little more unique.
And when I'm not traveling for the newsletter, I am a fiend for Google research. I love doing that kind of work.
Well, you're a journalist. That's part of your job, right?
Right. So it's really not this like Luddite anti-tech screed or anything. It's more just like I wanted to have more of a sense of the unexpected, of serendipity, the ability to be surprised, and also connection to the place and the people in it. And I think that both of those things have been diminished for me, and from what I'm hearing for other people as well, by the reliance on the internet for travel.
Yeah. So you're traveling through Europe. I'm just reading a snippet of what you wrote on LinkedIn, but no Google research, no reservations, no Instagram inspiration, no GPS maps. You say no mindless scrolling. So
Yes.
It's interesting you mentioned the word philosophical just a few minutes ago, because you are a doctor of philosophy from Harvard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When I was preparing for this, I was thinking about your project and looking at it, and I feel like there are a lot of philosophical underpinnings of this project. For example, what drives people for their need to prepare or know things in advance, or expectations, having thoughts or a mindset around expectations. And if you have certain expectations and they're not met, there's a lot around there. Perhaps search for happiness. There are some sort of core mindset things that are built into this, I think. Would you agree with that? Do you think,
Absolutely.
Thinking about it through that lens of philosophy? I do want to get into the practicalities of sort of like the logistics and practical travel advice on how, okay, like, maybe somebody's interest is piqued and they want to experiment with this, and what are some ways to sort of ease the pain, or, make it fun or whatever. But I guess the point is it's supposed to be a little bit more challenging. I have another rant on that, but yeah, if you're just looking at it through the lens of philosophy, and you're looking at, sort of mindset and human nature and that kind of thing, what do you think are the core tenets that underpin this project? Philosophical tenets, let's say.
Yes. One is absolutely trying to ease away from the sort of predetermined expectations, that sense that if you go to a place and you don't eat in these restaurants or buy ceramics from this particular shop or stand on this cliff, you have somehow missed the opportunity, that you're not getting the best of the best. So I'm trying to get away from that mindset. There is also a sense of like what really is discovery? What do we travel for? And if it is to open ourselves to new experiences, to learn about and encounter other ways of experiencing the world, other ways of understanding the world, then probably we need to arrive with fewer expectations about what we're going to hit while we're there. Also, another thing that I think that the internet has contributed to and how people travel is, turning travel into consumption, whether it's because you're there to eat certain meals or buy certain things, or even just to capture certain experiences. I think we've probably all been in that situation where, you get to an incredible site or some ancient historic monument and you're surrounded and there are people there who are basically just there for the selfie. And so I wanted to try and think about, is there a way to travel that is less extractive and more just leaving yourself open to the experience?
And serendipity that comes
And
along with that,
serendipity.
I guess.
And serendipity.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. Now, back to the show. The question, that's a powerful question. What is discovery? What does discovery mean? I think you said. And if you're about to go on a trip and you're asking yourself that question, I don't know, that could bring up some interesting answers, I would say. It doesn't mean you don't go to see the Eiffel Tower in Paris.
No, absolutely not. But imagine what it's like to come across, because it wasn't the Eiffel Tower, but to come across this, what is an important monument for a place and not even have known it existed, and to just open the door and find yourself. This happened to me in Karlovy Vary, which used to be called Carlsbad, and it had this whole, it was this real center for spa culture, like medical spa culture, during the 19th and early 20th centuries. And I walked into this like very grand looking building. I walked up to it and had no idea what it was, and just like pulled on the door and it happened to open, and I walked into it, and it was the imperial baths, which had been specifically kind of built for the German emperor's visit at that point, and has since been turned into a kind of museum about what the spa culture was like. And, if I had done even the most basic research before, I would have known it existed, but I didn't. And so it just like, that has been like, I think one of the greatest surprises and lessons to me about traveling this way is the way it turns everything into a discovery. It's really quite wonderful.
But on the flip side of that, you have to be willing to miss that.
Exactly.
Right? If that was one of the best parts about your trip, then you would have, but you can't say you would have missed the best part about your trip, because perhaps you would have stumbled upon something else that you wouldn't have known what you were missing.
Right.
Yeah, this is where
and I still might have missed, who knows what I missed.
Oh,
there.
sure. I mean, you always miss stuff. That's the thing.
That gets back to, another sort of another one of the kind of philosophical aspects of this is like, what does best even mean? And that, as somebody, in addition to writing about travel, I write a lot about food, and I've seen the way that um, rankings or these lists of best restaurants in the world, I've seen the way that that has changed. Uh, Not just the restaurants themselves, but the way people travel for food, for example, or to experience certain restaurants. But, when you think about what the meals are from your life that stand out in memory, could you say what was the best and how much of the best was about what you were actually putting in your mouth and how much of it had to do with the people you were eating with or the mood you were in or the way the service was or just the weather? Who knows? And and so like I think there is something about this kind of travel that like it forces you to try and turn that part of your brain off that is constantly ranking things or trying to figure out if different experiences meet some kind of standard that you yourself probably didn't set.
That's the key. If you're comparing and contrasting and trying to measure up different things, that like trying to eliminate that's a huge mental hurdle to jump
It's
over.
super
I mean,
hard.
at the core of this is, I would say maybe the number one thing that might be, I don't want to say holding people back from doing this more, but just sort of as a driving force of humans to not want to miss out, the FOMO thing, right?
Right.
At its core, it's like, this comes down to like the fear of missing out, the FOMO. And, you're good, because travel is one of those things where and somebody mentioned this on the show and I never forgot it. It's like one of the few purchases you make that you don't know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah.
If you think about it, right?
Yes.
I mean, you get like a plane ticket or whatever, but you don't really know. Yeah, unless you buy a package tour or something, then you know exactly what you're getting every day, to an extent, but you still don't know. There's still like, it's not like buying a purse or something and then you know what you're getting, you have it in your hands. And so people want to, like you said, extract value from their investment. Perhaps they want to maximize their trip. But this comes down again. That's why I kind of wanted to bring this through the lens of philosophy and you having a PhD in it, because doesn't this really all come back to like how you're thinking about going into something like this? And if you're able to let go of FOMO or some of these, more sort of inclinations that we have.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the first places that I went for the newsletter, and this was intentional, was Bologna, because Bologna is known, its whole identity, not whole identity, much of its identity comes from its relationship to food. It's where bolognese sauce comes from. It's where lasagna comes from. It's the region that Parmigiano and prosciutto come from, and so it's always had this really intense relationship to food. And I knew going there that there were going to be extraordinary restaurants. I just didn't know which ones they were, and I knew that if I did even the slightest research, any app, any list, I would come away with a list of places that I absolutely had to go to, or I wasn't getting the best bolognese, or I wasn't getting, the best mortadella sandwich. And I felt it when I was there. Every meal I would feel this slight anxiety
I'm
of
missing out.
Exactly. Is this
Yeah.
really good? What am I missing here? But it's a muscle, where you just have to train it to think, actually, I don't know if this is the best bolognese, but it's pretty darn good. And I'm really enjoying eating it. And it's just like, it's just something you have to practice at. But if you're successful, think of what it means. It means that you're opening yourself up to the possibility of finding a pleasure that you define yourself, and that it's kind of always, that possibility is always there, whether or not you have the time to wait in line or you get the booking, or any of those other things where people are defining the best for you.
Yeah. And you write about food, and anybody listening might have their own version of that. Like maybe it's not food for them, but maybe it's, seeing the best museums or whatever.
Absolutely.
This is something we can all experiment with. Like we don't have to do a whole trip like you're doing, Lisa. Or you could be on a trip and do this for a day, experiment with these mindsets or experiment with this sort of approach. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there doing it, right? But
absolutely,
it's just, that's what the point of this podcast is let's have these conversations. Let's just let's talk about this stuff. I don't know, as we're talking through it, I'm thinking about, we've focused a lot on the sort of the challenges, like the FOMO and managing expectations and things like that. But the opportunities are abundant. Like you have the opportunity to practice, let's say, like some version of mindfulness, right? Like you're there, you're in the restaurant, and like, I'm just going to be grateful. I'm going to appreciate the bolognese I have in front of me. This is what I have. This is where I am. And let me just, be grateful for what I'm getting here in this moment.
Love the bolognese you're with. That'll be like the tagline
there you go.
this.
There's your t-shirt. You can get it over on the Substack,
Brilliant. I love it.
But that's an example of what, as I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking about these opportunities that are in front of us. And rather than, perhaps there's something there too, rather than focusing on sort of all of the challenges, just like, is there a way to drop that baggage and just like go with a beginner's mind and that Zen philosophy, speaking of philosophy, and just kind of embrace the opportunity that comes with that?
Absolutely. I think there's also, one thing that we haven't really talked about, but there is something about like putting down your phone that opens up the possibility of more connection with other people. And it's something that I've actually, this is something else that I've had to like train myself on. I find that sometimes I just forget that you can like ask people questions. Like if you're lost, you can ask them and they'll tell you where to go.
There's people there.
There's people. And like when you start thinking about that, you realize that, there are all of these tiny opportunities for connection with people, that even if it is just somebody giving you directions, but in that moment of pointing you in the right direction, you're also just getting a tiny glimpse of their personality or of how they think about the place that they're in, or just even their friendliness, how you connect to them. And that also, I find, is a big part of what makes travel rewarding.
Yeah. Well, what are your best tips for...
Best tips. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all,
how many do you have? Are they like a bullet point list? What are people...
I don't know. It's a little random. I can probably come up with a lot of them. And some of these are, let's go with like 6 or so. 6. How does that sound?
Yeah. How are we framing this up? This is sort of the best tips for like preparing for a trip like this, and how to handle sort of situations when you're on the ground as well.
It's kind of all over. For preparing for it, like there's no preparation. That's the greatest thing.
Perfect. We're just going right on a trip. There you go. Look at so many benefits, right? You just saved yourself hours of screen time.
It's amazing.
There you go.
I know. Talk about efficiency.
Are people allowed to buy? They're not allowed to buy a guidebook and do like the paper-based research thing.
I don't know. You could, but then what's the fun of that?
Right. Okay. I see. Because the offline Unplugged thing, you could say a book about a place is not, you're not online, but I understand what you mean. The spirit behind it is to go in knowing that not much or nothing.
Yes.
Only what you know.
It really is. Another thing that I've loved about this is like, there always comes a moment, because usually all I'm doing is just like walking everywhere, but there always comes a moment where like the place, the city, like how it fits, you get a sense of how it fits together, and it's almost like solving a puzzle in a bit. Like things kind of click into place. Oh, that neighborhood is actually near that neighborhood. Okay. And that,
because you're actually paying attention to where things are, you mean?
Exactly. So that's pretty fun. So that's why I don't use printed matter for research ahead of time. Really, the only thing I do ahead of time, it has to be a place that either I've never been to at all, or one that, like, my my criteria is like, would I know where to go and eat there? And if I would, then I can't go. Like, I was hoping to go to Bergen because I've never been and I've heard it's really beautiful, but I actually know where to go and eat, and so that would take some of. I know what restaurants have reputations. Let's put it that way, and so that kind of like eliminated Bergen for me. So I just kind of start with that, and then I use the everywhere function on Skyscanner and like see where I can get to for not much money that I've never been to before. The one tip that I think is perhaps underappreciated, even though it seems a little obvious, is the tourist office. Like, most train stations in Europe have some kind of tourist information office, and they will give you maps, actual paper maps for free, that are obviously a very important resource. And they also have a lot of information, and sometimes you have to push through it to not get the standard spiel of tourist restaurants that they give to everybody. But they are actually a wealth of information, and you can find. When I was in Zadar in Croatia, there's all kinds of just materials and posters and handwritten things that people have posted there. And I saw a notice for the Beach Bar Bamboo, that because this was during the Euro Cup finals, and there was a match being held, or during the Euro Cup, this bar was going to have a large screen TV out, and they were having like special street food festival, and I would never have heard about it had I not wandered into the tourist office. But it made for an entertaining place to watch the Croatia-Spain match. So tourist office is one. Also, I think something that people don't realize is that, because I don't make hotel bookings, I just show up and find a place to stay. And I don't know that this is common that everyone knows this, but you can actually ask to see the hotel room before you agree to pay for it. And I know I always feel a little uncomfortable doing that, but it turns out that their hotels are totally used to the people asking for that, and they're totally fine taking you up to see it. So that has eliminated some pretty scary hotel rooms from my travels by doing that. What else would I say? I think there's something about like learning how to read a line. Oftentimes, like if you're in Italy, I know this is true of Japan. It's even true here in Copenhagen. Outside some bakeries, there'll be huge lines forming, and there's like initial instinct, I think, is, oh, that's it must be good. There's all of these people lining up for whatever it is that they're selling. But I think it's worth like paying attention to who is in line, and if there are a lot of non-natives in line, that's probably a place that is Instagram famous more than locally famous. And that doesn't mean that it's bad, but it means that it's a certain thing. And if you're trying to get away from that kind of traveling, you might want to go someplace else. I don't know. I feel like the other ones are things that I've already said. Like,
well, how about approaching strangers? What's your vibe there?
I mean, first of all, like, and I think this is something that because I consider myself a relatively shy person. And so when I became a journalist, it was something I really had to work on to be able to go up to people on the street and interview them. But this thing you learn really early and fast, and is, I think, universally true. People love to talk about themselves. So if you can engage people in a conversation about their jobs, about what they're doing, about their city or how they relate to it, they will almost always like grasp the opportunity, even if they initially seem a little gruff. Asking people, if I had an experience also in Zadar in Croatia where there's these men that are called boatmen because they row people across the narrowest part of the harbor, and they've been doing. Apparently, this is a job that is passed from father to son, and there are families who have been dedicated to this for 5 or possibly even 10 generations. And I stopped. I rowed the boat, but then I asked the boatman. I wanted to find out more about the job. And at first, there's often like some kind of initial resistance, but if you just like are polite and sincerely interested, people will open up. And he definitely did. And I learned all about his family and about how he's worried because all he has is girls and he's not sure that they're going to want to take on the job. And also got a bigger picture of how tourism has changed the city and how it has affected his work. And it was just like a lovely exchange that, maybe we only talked for 15 minutes, but it kind of proved to me that truth, that if you are sincerely interested in what people are doing, they almost always take pleasure in explaining it to you.
Do you take these trips on your own?
Mostly, yes. Sometimes okay. I've met friends. I keep having friends volunteer to come with me, so maybe I have to try that.
But they want to.
Yes, but they have to like take an oath that they won't use their phones either. Yeah.
Well, because I wanted to ask, because fair question, especially for solo female travelers, that we get a lot of safety. You want to like kind of prepare yourself, make sure you're not getting into the dodgy taxi cabs and things like that. So what's your advice there?
Yeah. I don't want to downplay what are very real concerns and very real experiences. However, at least within Europe or most of Europe, I have found that just a simple kind of confidence and being aware of your surroundings. And yes, you get approached by people that might seem a little sketchy to you. And I think not being afraid to step away from that or to end those conversations. But I increasing, it's been a long time that I've actively worried about that, I think, because I do feel like and of course these things are always out of your control, but I do feel confident in navigating different places.
Yeah. And people, anybody listening they can have their own rules in order to have this experience. If they need to, you're like, all right, allow myself to research,
yes,
a little bit of safety tips and
absolutely.
Maybe neighborhoods to avoid and thing. This isn't, it's not.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember on the very first trip that I took for this, I was in Hamburg and I got lost. I ended up being out much later than I expected because it was actually Easter and I ended up I came across this midnight mass service and I went to that. And so I was walking back to the hotel quite late and I got lost and I had this map, but I somehow couldn't orient myself with it. And I did have this moment like, oh, I should probably, I thought I could ask somebody, but like going up to a strange man on the street at that hour did not seem like the best tactic. And so I decided, then I remembered, oh, there are taxis. And so I started walking toward a busier street where I thought I could hail a taxi and I was just going to take it to the hotel. But as soon as I got down to that street, I recognized where I was and I was able to orient from there. So, I am aware of those things, and I do take certain precautions. But I also think there's something to not being excessively afraid. I mean, it's been striking to me how many people, when they hear about this project, have responded with, "Oh, aren't you scared?" And fear has never, like, that's just not really a factor for me in it. Sometimes I can get annoyed, or I can like expect that maybe I won't be as comfortable as I thought, or I'll end up I'll get lost or something like that. There might be complications and hardships, but I don't, for me, like the negative, I don't really feel a lot of fear around what might happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's sounds funny because, the first iPhone came out in like summer 2007. Before you could say, I mean, they had other quote unquote smartphones before that. That was really the one that kind of blew it up with the apps and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, that's not that long ago. So
Right.
before that, we used to call this just travel.
Travel. Right.
We just called this travel.
Exactly.
Like this was travel. And
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not trying to, try to be a purist here or something like that. So it just be like, those were the days, I mean, certainly there are a lot of conveniences that come with the smartphone and modern day travel. But the reason why, or one of the reasons why I also wanted to have you come on and talk about some of the logistics on this, because it seems simple, but like, oh, we're just turning it off and going back to travel the way it used to be. But there is some nuance to this with logistics. Like, I mean, I remember I left the house, where I live without my phone to go downtown one day. And I just forgot. Oh yeah, I had like the kiosk was closed where you could buy the subway ticket. And then I needed an app to buy a ticket. And I didn't have a phone. So then I had to like just ride the train illegally, which was fine. I didn't get caught. But you know what I mean? It's like that kind of stuff where you like download the app, you're like, oh, and like some of these things require. So then what do you do
in those situations? Yeah, no, it's happened a few times. And in Bologna, one of the hotels that I went into, I asked if they had a room available, and the woman said, "Yes, we have one left. You have to book it online." And I said, "I can't book it online." And she said, "I'm sorry." And then I went into the whole spiel and explained how I was doing this project. And she said, "Yeah, that's very nice, but I can't book it for you." And so I had to go someplace else.
Which is insane.
Right. Exactly.
You're standing in the hotel.
And like, take my money, please.
No. What is sometimes with these things? Yeah, you're just like, what is this world? Like, what's going on here?
And it does, it does lead to inconveniences. It also happened to me when I went out to that bamboo beach bar to watch the soccer match. It was quite a ways out of the city, and on the way back, I thought I would be able to take a taxi, but there weren't any because there was this major match going on. And so I went to the bus stop. There were no buses coming, and then I saw that there was a bike share up ahead. I got really excited because there was
one bike an app.
And right, I'm standing there ready to unlock it and thought, I need a nap. So I ended up walking back. So, it does occasionally cause some inconvenience.
Yeah, annoyances. But like, what's funny is they are only annoyances because you have the smartphone experience to compare it to. Like if we pre-2007 or whatever, it was like a life. It like sometimes things happen and then, it's an inconvenience in your life because there's traffic or whatever, but you're not comparing it to the instant gratification we have now, where we can just instantly get the thing we need.
That is a great point. Exactly.
It's just like, it's only hard, I'm using air quotes, because it goes back to the expectation. We have something to an experience that's become normal that was not a normal travel experience up until, recently, to compare it to.
Exactly. And also, this is something that, maybe this goes back to like some of the ideas behind the project, but I kind of have this belief that, a little inconvenience, a little difficulty, some complications actually makes the experience richer. And one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of travel writing, and just like what my own editors have wanted, is that there's not a lot of room for negative experiences anymore. You don't see a lot of essays or articles talking about, that disastrous time when there was a massive train strike and you couldn't get to where you were going, or the really scary hotel you found yourself in. But like, those are some of the best stories, and they're part of what can make travel so different from our regular daily lives, is that you are exposed to, extremes on both ends of the spectrum. And so like I want to make room for that. And that doesn't mean that it's got to be a slog, because these trips have been incredibly enjoyable and fun and enlightening and inspiring for me personally. But it's okay if I get lost or I have a bad meal, or it in some ways, it makes the story better.
Those are the stories people want to hear. They don't want to hear about you sitting on the beach drinking a margarita. That's boring.
Right.
But is that because of travel media and their relationship with advertisers or potential sponsors?
Absolutely. So much.
We can't tell a negative story about Croatia because like one day they might want a full page ad in our magazine. And, if we do a disparaging story, it's going to prevent that, and I mean, this is an important point because this goes back to if you're researching, those things you come across, it's not that it's not what it seems, but understand that travel media, even bloggers that do sponsored posts and things like that, I mean, of course they're going to show you some of the best sides of the place and the highlights. And that doesn't mean, I don't think anybody's pretending that these, whatever, insert whatever destination that doesn't have its own, day-to-day struggles with all kinds of things like everybody else everywhere. That's not the job of, for better or worse, whatever. It's just something to be aware of, right? Like that's not really the job of travel media, is to like, it's to more like show the places you can explore and the culture. And that's a beautiful thing, right?
Absolutely.
There's that side to that you described.
Yeah. And it's like, I think it's just a question for each of us. Like, what do we want out of stories about other places or travel stories? Do you want just the fantasy, or is this like a shopping list for you of beautiful experiences, or do you want some narrative there? Do you want some complications? Do you want some tension? Maybe a little bit of reality there is going to make the story richer as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So do you carry the phone with you and have it off in case of like an absolute emergency?
Yes. And that's probably another safety thing that I should, and actually, like, I also like take photos with it because I have not bought a real camera yet. That's
okay.
Next.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. So you just have it in airplane mode all the time?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, and it's a lot of just like training yourself not to reach for it. I think because there are those times, when you're on public transportation where I think a lot of people just have that habit of pulling it out of their pocket or out of your bag, and staring at it. And so it's like, sometimes I've caught myself like mid-reach and have to like come up with, like, just remind myself, but also like part of it is sort of training yourself to be okay with a little boredom every now and then too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you found that the experience traveling without the phone has changed the relationship with the phone at home and given you more of a, I guess, are you
Balanced
more,
less addicted relationship to?
yeah, I mean, I guess that, and also just being in your community, like, has it
Yeah.
changed the way you interact with your community?
You know, I
Or do you binge
well,
when you come home?
yeah, I know, like crazy. No, I do, like, I actually do make a point now of not using it on the subway and just, or when I'm on the metro here in Copenhagen, and just like observing around me, because it's a, it that can be super interesting as well. It might not be that like same immediate serotonin dose to the brain that, scrolling through Instagram is. Um, but you can kind of see and learn all kinds of things just by looking around you. And so I do find myself doing more of that. And even when I'm traveling for other purposes, like just this past weekend, I was in Malmö to do the reporting for a story that I'm actually having published. And I found myself, and like there was no obligation for me, and in fact, like doing research was going to mean I did a better job on this story. But I did find myself just like not pulling my phone out for long swaths of the day, just because I am finding this way of traveling super fun and yeah, rewarding.
Yeah, I think these experiments are worth it, even if it's a short-term experiment for the long-term
Yeah.
relationship you have with your phone, which sounds strange. Like, who would ever think,
Yeah.
years ago we talk about our relationships with our phones,
Right.
but it's come to that.
It's so funny, I just someone who read the newsletter, but is herself a travel writer, got in touch with me and was telling me about how she had written a story probably around 2007. She had published a story about, imagine what it would be like to use your phone.
Only use your phone. I saw that comment.
For everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, she even registered like a domain, like I use my phone for travel or something. It was
Exactly.
like, how novel.
Right. Wow.
Who
What an
knew,
idea.
right? Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. And your point on the subway thing, or just like the public transport, looking around, it's like, it's so easy to kind of forget how insane and amazing this world is. I mean, not to get too sort of existential here, but we're on this floating rock with, whatever, the closest star, like almost 5 light years away or something. I mean, look around us. It's, there's plenty to see, Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a bunch of very, complex and deep philosophical questions.
Okay.
I'm a doctor of philosophy, so we'll end on a light note.
Oh, great. Good.
Speaking of that, why is there something instead of nothing? Why is all this here? Come on, give us the answer, Lisa. You must have written about these things at Harvard, I'm sure.
My degree was in history, right?
Okay.
That's no excuse, I know, but why is there something and not nothing?
No, you don't have to answer that. I'm just kind of messing with you. But before I let you go, though, I do want to get a couple of your, I don't want to say favorite, because then we're getting back into the compare and contrast things, but like I always like to say destinations that you would tell people, these are really nice places to spend some quality time in.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to counter that a tiny bit by just saying another thing that traveling this way, that it has opened up for me, is any place, every place is a story, has its stories. And coming from my professional background, where when I traveled, it was because I already had an assignment to do a story. I was going there to do the story that I had already imagined. Going this way, where I don't know anything, but somehow discover that a story reveals itself to me, no matter where I am, that has been kind of a great thing to figure out. So the last place that I was in, I haven't written about this yet, but the last place I was in for the newsletter was Glasgow. And Glasgow is not a place that I would have normally gravitated to. I don't know why. I've been to Edinburgh, love Edinburgh, but it's not a place I would have normally gravitated to. And I don't think, I had some vague ideas of what Glasgow was, but I don't think I would have been able to come up with, at least not without doing a lot of research, come up with oh, I want to go and research this or discover, do this story. But just walking around and talking to people, these stories revealed themselves to me. And so that's actually it's sort of changed my relationship with choosing a destination or figuring out where I want to go, because what's motivating me is that search for the unexpected, for those stories. But if I have to think about places where I find a lot of stories and that are favorites in that sense, Morocco is right up there. Marrakesh in particular. This goes back to, this was for an assignment, but I did a story there where I just interviewed people in the main square, the Jma Fna, where there's this amazing variety, and over the course of the day, changing kinds of people and roles who pass through there. So everyone from, boiled egg vendors in the morning to snake charmers in the afternoon, to gymnasts in the evening, to people selling erotic aids in the late at night. And it was just this, once I started looking at it less as this, incredibly exotic place and more as this collection of people with fascinating stories behind them, that really became one of my favorites. So that's one I would recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, the parade of vendors.
Exactly. Exactly.
But they all have a story.
They do. And it's sometimes kind of amazing. How do you become a snake charmer? Turns out, you got to catch your own snake for one. Didn't know that before I went and did that. Yes.
Yeah, that's not something how do you become a snake charmer? That is, wow, that's cool. That's cool. I like the Glasgow. Yes. Example. We had a guy on the podcast a while back. He ran every street in Glasgow.
Really?
Scottish guy. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to go listen to that.
Yeah, it's really cool. To wrap this up, I think that comes down to, you mentioned how the story would reveal itself. And that comes down to trust, right? You're kind of trusting in yourself to kind of just be there and be open to experiences as a traveler. And then you're trusting in sort of, the place to kind of just be there with you.
Yeah, and that's a great way of putting it.
That's a really nice, balanced place to be, because then all the other stuff we talked about today, the FOMO and expectations and all that stuff, if you can get to that place of two-sided trust, we can call it, maybe that stuff just kind of falls along on the wayside, and then you can just kind of be open to the experience.
Yeah, I think that's right.
We will link up to the Substack, but if you want to mention it, the Unplugged Traveler is
right. It's the unpluggedtraveler.substack.com.
And where are you going next?
Okay, well, I've done several cities in different parts of Europe, and so I thought I would try an extended countryside one. So I'm actually going to, later in September, walk the Cotswold Way, which will be 7 or 8 days.
Amazing.
And I really hope, I realize I might be setting myself up for minor disaster in that because you don't camp along the way. You're like walking from village to village, but I of course won't have any reservations. And so I don't know how many, like, I know that they exist, that people do this, and that there are like bed and breakfasts out there. I'm hoping they're not super crowded, because that could be a complication. But yes, so that'll be like 7 or 8 days in September where I'm walking that trail.
Amazing. Well, I'm signed up for the newsletter. There's different paid options, but there's also a free option for people listening if you want to follow along on that journey and the other ones. Really appreciate your time today, Lisa, and your perspective, hearing your perspectives today. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, would like to give you the opportunity before you jet to just kind of, if you want to share, a little call to action or perhaps a challenge for people listening around this. Maybe just some words, final words.
I would love to invite people to just try it for a little while. Like, pick an afternoon when you're in a new place to you and just walk around and see where it leads you, and just be open to the experience without having to resort to your phone.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to staying in touch over here in Scandinavia, and thanks for your time.
Equally. Take care. Thank you.
There you have it. Thank you once again to Lisa for stopping by the show. Of course, we'll link up to her Substack. It's unpluggedtraveler.substack.com. Check it out. I'm signed up over there, and I've been enjoying following along. And, you heard me share the story in this episode, just leaving my house for the day without the phone, how I ran into some issues. Maybe I could have been better prepared and thought about some of the things I use my phone for. And you heard Lisa's challenge at the end, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to summarize this with a quick call to action for you. Wherever you are, just leave without your phone for a few hours. And if you want to do a little more thinking about it than I did, if you haven't done that in a while, you probably have done it. I mean, we've all done it, but I feel like it used to be more commonplace. We didn't really always have our phones with us. It was kind of just, sometimes we would just leave without it, but now it's just like attached to our pockets. It's always with us. And I find taking my daily walks without my phone to be liberating and freeing. And just even not having it in my pocket cuts down on sort of the trigger of just grabbing it, all these things. So if you haven't gotten out of the house and explored, with the traveler's mindset without your phone recently, go ahead and do it. Yeah, like I said, with the traveler's mindset, to go out and, like Lisa said, just kind of discover a place and be open to experiences. Even if it's just a few hours, you never know what you're going to find. So I hope you get out and do that. Let me know if you do, by the way. I love hearing from listeners, and you can get in touch anytime. You can sign up for our free newsletter over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. So I'll leave you with that challenge and this quote to wrap things up. This one from Robin Sharma, who said, quote, "The activity you're most avoiding contains your biggest opportunity." End quote. Thought that was a good one to finish this up. Thanks so much for listening, for being a part of this community. And until next time, peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by zerototravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.